Good evening and welcome to Hello, It's Us, a show based on the belief that life in general goes better when it's us all pulling together as opposed to you, me, and them working across purposes. Hello, It's Us is brought to you through a collaboration between the Extended Dream Foundation and Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham, one of your co-hosts. My partner Keith Ruff here.
Hello, Terry.
Howdy. And tonight, as the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, celebration approaches us, we're going to talk a bit about Senator Tom Harkin, who was the author and considered father of the ADA, and go over some of the many things that Tom's done. As most people know, was born in a little town of Cumming, graduated from high school at Dowling of West Des Moines, then went on to Iowa State, then into the Navy, Air Force.
I think maybe.
One of the two during the Vietnam War was stationed in Japan and at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba.
Yes.
Then went to, when he got out of the service, he went to work for Neil Smith. And worked for him for a while, went with him on a trip to Vietnam while they were touring around. He and another person on the trip managed to come upon the so-called tiger cages at one of the prisons.
Yes.
Which proved that the Viet Cong did in fact have U.S. prisoners and were in fact torturing them. So he did that for a while. He ran in 1972 for the House of Representatives in a part of southwestern Iowa that hadn't elected a Democrat in decades. And even though he performed very well and got lots of votes, he was defeated. So he went to work in Ames as an attorney and worked for a couple years there, and then in 1974 he ran again for the House of Representatives and won. And he served 5 terms in the House of Representatives and was involved in a lot of different committees. A lot of social issues, was involved some in supporting Roe versus Wade through the years, in pushing for minimum wage, and in fact, last year introduced legislation that would have raised minimum wage to just over $10 an hour. Yeah, $10.10. Has served as chairman of Pension and Retirement Committee, and has, been very outspoken about how companies have been able to raid their employees' pension funds
Yeah.
and basically steal a lifetime of work from them. And we've all read a lot about that through the years, whether it's been stealing from union pension funds or stealing from company pension funds, but
It all
it's a
adds
horrible,
up.
it's a horrible thing to think that you've saved and have enough money
For
to retire on, and that Social Security will help a little, but Social Security, much to the surprise of many people, was never intended to replace a salary.
No, it wasn't.
It was intended to supplement savings or a pension program. So when folks find themselves suddenly depending on Social Security,
It's hard.
or and we see these days an incredible number of older folks who are still working,
Yeah.
whether in the career that they grew up in.
Or different.
Yeah, you see a lot of folks at discount stores or fast food places or things like that, because not all companies keep people past 65.
Although the government is trying to encourage 67 now.
But one of the problems with that whole thing is, for a number of years now, we've been hearing that as the baby boomers start retiring,
Yeah.
there's not people there to replace them.
No.
And that's something else that Senator Harkin has gotten into, partly through the Americans with Disabilities Act, is to push for folks with disabilities to be welcomed more into the workforce. I mean, it's just ridiculous how many persons with disabilities are unemployed.
Yeah, it's over 70%.
And most of those folks want to work.
Yes.
And Senator Harkin had a passion for helping folks with disabilities, partly because his older brother had hearing problems.
Yes.
So he was pushing for that because he'd grown up with it and saw that his brother didn't have to be any different than anybody else.
Anyone else.
That with a couple modifications he
But
could do
he
fine.
did see the problems his brother went through.
Yeah. And he also had a nephew who had gotten injured in the war and had veterans benefits that helped him both with the equipment he needed, with the care he needed, did modifications to his home.
Yeah.
And he pushed for years to get a program very much like that through Congress called MICASA that would have given folks the assistance they needed to stay in their homes. as opposed to going to some kind of a facility. And he has long fought against the current Medicaid system, which is very much a medical institutional model where about 2/3 of the money for long-term care dollars are spent on institutional services, and only 1/3 go to home and community-based
Yeah.
services. And that is changing slowly,
very
but
slowly.
not nearly enough. And until that gets fixed so that there's more being spent on home and community service and less on institutional care, we're going to continue to have issues. And people aren't going to live full and satisfying lives
No, they're not.
because they have no control over their life.
And the problem is only going to get worse because of better health care. We are living that much longer.
Well, that, and one of the things that's starting to help in the fight now is, whereas generations before never thought you could argue with the government or with
Yeah.
federal programs, the baby boomers are very out front and outspoken in saying, we don't have any intention of going to a facility or an institution. We will live in our own homes. You figure out how to get the services that we need.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a lot, and one of the future programs will deal with it some, in that home health services, unfortunately, are not looked at as professional services per se.
Which is very unfortunate.
You know, that the services aren't provided in the home as much as it should be. Or do folks look at the jobs as professional? You know, they look at it too often as glorified babysitting.
Especially personal assistant.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that the senator fought for years. And as a result, there's not enough home health agencies around. You know, if you don't live in a fairly decent sized city, you probably don't have access
No, you
to the
don't.
services. You know, smaller communities don't have that. And, you know, one of the other big issues is they're not funded appropriately. You know, unfortunately, and I was talking with one of my aides this morning about it, is that the American perspective of what people should get for what jobs, it seems very contra to what the rest of the world thinks.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you're a doctor, or you're a teacher, or you're a healthcare professional in other parts of the world, you're respected. You're reimbursed for what you're doing. And it just has seemed very strange to me that here in the United States, we're not nearly as concerned about the qualifications or the salaries for the people who take care of our most fragile and vulnerable groups, whether they be disabled or not,
Yeah.
being children, folks with disabilities, and the aging population.
Yes.
You know, there recently was an aide in one of the independent living places in Iowa City who got fired for a variety of reasons, but who the employer had to get special permission from the state to hire this person who had 6 OWI convictions
Wow.
and a couple other charges. Why on earth would you get special permission for somebody like that to work?
I don't know.
You know, too many, well, there are no requirements for home health workers in the state of Iowa. You know, you go in, you apply, if you're breathing, they pretty much hire you.
And the reason why we get low-grade help is the pay is very minimal.
Yeah, it certainly is not a living wage. So those are all things that, you know, Senator Harkin has fought for through the years. He's pretty much supported Roe v. Wade.
Yes.
He announced in May of 2009 that he would oppose any effort to try to overturn Iowa's Supreme Court decision that legalized same-sex marriage. And had kind of an interesting statement about that. It says, "We all grow as we get older. We learn things, we become more sensitive to people and people's lives," said Harkin. "The more I've looked at this, I've grown to think differently about how we should live. I guess I've got to the point of live and let live," which is a pretty good philosophy to have. Yeah, if things are not hurting you, why do you want to oppose them and prevent other people from enjoying the life they want? And of course, in 1992, Tom started a run for president and stuck in it for a while, won a couple of the early primaries, but ultimately withdrew and threw his support to then Governor Clinton. But through the years, the senator has championed, you know, the disability cause for a number of years. He championed the cause with Christopher Reeves,
Yes.
who used much of his last days on the trail of trying to find cures for spinal cord injury, establishing foundations to help people. In 2002, I was fortunate to attend a forum at Iowa State where the senator and Christopher Reeves were at and got to speak backstage as well as.
Unfortunately, I attended one here at the IMU.
They had their show down, you know, but they had, you know, he did so much in the time he had. I tease people sometimes about that and say, I don't know what was so super about Superman, because I've made it longer than Superman has.
Tom is really gonna be missed, not only in the field of disability, but all around. He was
Yeah.
all around politician.
Yeah. And he, as I say, he started or tried for so many things. And, you know, the ADA is very much the civil rights bill for folks with disabilities.
Yes,
And then, of course, from the ADA came the Olmsted decision,
yes,
which opened things
a little
for
more.
a whole lot more people, because the decision said that states couldn't require disabled individuals to live in institutions to get the services they needed. So over the last, this is the 15th anniversary of the Olmsted decision.
Yeah,
So there's been lots and lots of folks who have come out of institutions. Unfortunately, as with most everything, I was a little behind, but there are a number of states who closed all their state mental health
Yeah.
institutes down,
yeah,
and you know have pushed home community-based services, and a number of other facilities that were more like institutions have gone to moving folks out into the community in apartments and houses. And I've got a friend who works for The Village in Clear Lake, formerly known as Handicap Village. And he called me a couple weeks ago to say he had been to the open house for one of the new houses that had been opened, and kind of lamenting that, you know, 24th anniversary of the ADA coming up. And as he looked at the house, he said, it was very nice, but if you'd been here, you'd have blown your top, because there were little things that hadn't been checked out. You know, where handles were, where light switches were, some of the windows. But he said the most glaring thing was the sidewalk in front of the house wasn't it wasn't flat. It was tilted, probably so water could drain.
yeah,
But back in the day when I used a manual chair, if you did one of those, you know, you were going to end up going the direction it was.
yeah,
And then the sidewalk that went in front of the house was the same thing, except it tilted a little toward the street. So he said, I could just see you going down this sidewalk, hitting the driveway, turning a little bit, and going right down the middle of the street on this cul-de-sac. Mainly because he had seen me do that before.
This news makes me question, was there any input
No,
from disabled individuals?
there wasn't.
And that,
And in previous building things, they had done that, but they had since hired a new person to direct that. And unlike his predecessor, he didn't call for input from disabled members of the community. So that was part of that. But, well,
now
we've
it's gonna cost even more to redo that.
quite possible. Well, we've burned through our time today.
Yeah.
Hope we were able to give a little bit of insight on Senator Harkin and some of the many, many things that he's done for folks with disabilities, both in the United States and around the world.
Yes.
Because the world is trying to come up with a set of ADA requirements, and unfortunately with that, the United States hasn't passed it.
Not yet.
Unfortunately, there's a group in the Senate, I believe, who are holding out because they think that's going to give little countries power over the United States.
And if any of you out there want to meet Tom Harkin, he'll be in town on July 26th.
Yep, 11. Well, we'll have the ADA celebration on the
11.
Fountain Stage
Yeah.
in front of the Sheraton from 11 to 2.
Yes. And it'll be a good opportunity to meet the man that we were talking about tonight.
And an opportunity to thank him
Yes,
and wish him good luck in the future.
yes.
Okay.
Enjoy the week.
Take care.
Bye now.